And a lot of people are surprised to know that sustainability actually means something. It's actually defined at United Nations level. It talks about meeting our needs without compromising the needs of future generations, not just our own generations, but all life's generations. And it broadens this idea out. And at the United Nations level, it's defined as sustainable development. Now, the words develop and sustain are very often found in the opposite camps. These opposites can sometimes seem contradictory. Develop in the idea that the right of lifting people out of poverty, the idea of education, the idea of healthcare. These are the things which sit in the develop. And in the sustain, they sit in the, you're looking at things like how do we do this in a way which doesn't compromise the ecological system we depend upon. How do we ensure that we don't undermine our own well-being? So the well-being, our own well-being is intrinsically linked to the well-being of the ecological systems. And these two opposites are coming together and forming a synthesis. And that synthesis between develop and sustain is where sustainability sits. Now, at the moment, there isn't a clear definition of how that translates to the real world. And that is a debate and a dialogue and a discussion and a language which is developing. So essentially, this is what we're here today to talk about. Now, this new territory, this new world is going to need champions. And some of those champions are in this room today, who have been fighting this fight for a good long time. And there are new champions, I'm sure, that are growing as become more informed and aware of what this new idea is about. And one of these champions is Peter. I'm going to say three things. I've been told to shut up and let Peter talk. I'm going to say three things about Peter. One is he's a man of faith, and we're going to need lots of that going ahead. The second thing is a man of simple living. He's a man who's tested the question of how much is enough personally, and he's got a lot to say about that. And the third thing is a man with a strong voice. And I'll shut up and let us hear that voice. Peter.
Thank you so much for inviting me here today. I'm very glad that I'm here. The last time I tried to get here, an act of God happened and I was unable to make it. But I got up early this morning and drove, and here I am, and it is a delight to be here. And what has been created here, I have only had a small taste of what has been created here, and it is quite remarkable and beautiful, and I would like to honour that publicly. I'm going to talk a little bit, I'm going to talk for 45 minutes or thereabouts about where we are now, because I think to answer the question of how we go forward as a society, as individuals, we need to understand where we are now. And there are lots of conflicting understandings and expressions of that. And my voice is only one voice to add to the many ideas that are beginning now to filter through. But first of all, I would like you to think of paradise. Our vision on this windy, wet, sun-kissed island. What is our vision of what paradise is? And how is paradise presented to us? I would say that in large part, it is presented as an arc of white sand over which hangs a palm tree, and in the corner is a little shack. And in front of that is an azure blue sea. If you walk into Cardiff, if you go into Bristol, you walk past the travel agents, that's what you're going to see. If you watch television, that's what predominantly you will be presented with as paradise. Many James Bond films end up in places exactly as I have described. Have any of you been there? Have any of you been to paradise?
Yeah.
I went to, do you know where Vanuatu is? Anyone know where Vanuatu is?
I haven't been there.
Yeah. It used to be called the New Hebrides, and it's a collection of small islands in the southern Pacific Ocean, and it is as far away as you can get from here geographically as possible. It's about 12,500 miles away from here. And we landed on a tiny airport in a small plane, and we got out, we drove through the rainforest to the other side of the island we were on. We were on an island called Tanna, which is the southernmost island of the Vanuatuan chain. And then we arrived at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and there I was. I was in paradise. Just to exemplify how strong this idea is, in the 1980s, there was an advertisement for Guinness. I'm sure you're familiar with Guinness. And it began with a man lying on board a very expensive yacht. And his head was resting in the lap of a Polynesian woman who was stroking his brow. And he fell asleep. And the screen went all fuzzy. Yeah? And then it went into a dream. And in his dream, he was standing in a pub in front of a dartboard,
Paradise.
holding a pint of Guinness. Yeah? And then the screen went all fuzzy again. And he opened his eyes and he looked into this young woman's eyes and he said, "I've just had the most extraordinary dream. I've been to paradise." And it was a wonderful juxtaposition between our vision and the reality of our own lives. Why we should continue to paint paradise as far away is a very big question. And I'd just like to leave you to think about that. The island of Tanna, as well as being beautiful and containing the beaches of apparent paradise, also had an active volcano. And every 3 minutes or so, there would be a great big boom, and everyone would just carry on as normal. And I was working with a film crew at the time, and the director said, "Has anyone ever seen a live volcano?" And we all said, "No." And he said, "Well, I would like to film up there tomorrow morning. So I'm just going to go and ask permission to see whether we can take our camera equipment up there." And he came back 5 minutes later and he said, "We don't need permission. We just drive down that road and apparently there's a sign and we just follow it." And so we got up at 5 o'clock in the morning. We loaded up all our kit into a Land Rover. We drove down the road and sure enough, pinned to a tree was just a black and white sign which just said volcano, and there was an arrow underneath it. And so we turned right, we drove through the rainforest, and then we got above the tree line, and the ground was starting to smoke. There was that amazing sulphurous smell, and the sound of the booming got immensely louder. And we arrived in this moonscape, and we parked up, and there was a little winding path that led upwards, and so we took it, and 2 minutes later, there we were, standing on the rim of a volcano. And I was looking down into this cauldron of molten lava and smoke. An extraordinary, vivid experience. And standing next to me was the sound man. And he was the son of the Albanian ambassador in London. And he said, "Do you know what I really like about this place, Pete?" And I said, "No." "What?" And he said, "The complete absence of health and safety notes." And he was right. Imagine if there was a volcano in the Black Mountains or in the Brecons. Imagine what we would be put through just to go and stand on the lower slopes. We'd all be dressed in white boiler suits with orange hard hats. We'd have to have a day's induction course. We'd then have to sign an indemnity saying we weren't going to sue anyone if anything happened to us. But there, the freedom to roam, and the freedom to go where you please, without the imposition of a health and safety culture, was palpable, and it was beautiful. But what struck me most of all, standing on the lip, on the rim of that volcano, was that we inhabit such a small space, such a thin layer, in the space between the rock and the lava and the universe and the stars. And really, in the grand scheme of the universe, it is a microscopic layer that we exist and live on. I'm going to sit down. And this miracle that we exist within is never still. There is nothing, as the scientists now are telling us, that lasts forever. Not this universe, not a physical forever, and therefore we should know it and ourselves as part of a constantly moving and evolving form. Nothing is certain. Nothing is solid. And we are perhaps just beginning to scratch the surface of this new reality. Evolution is presented to us as something that is solid, immutable, and unstoppable. And so many of the old understandings simply cannot now contain this ever-shifting new version of reality. Let's go back a bit. The monotheistic God of Judaism, Zoroastrianism, Islam, and Christianity, as we know him, and it is a him, isn't it? Well, let's look at him. We need to look at him. First of all, he is old. He is ancient. He is bearded. He looks a little like the older version of Rowan Williams, the former Archbishop of Canterbury. He lives in the sky. And we are told that he loves us, but he is also capable of bouts of anger, flooding the planet, bringing plague and disease. And oh yes, he is the giver of life and death. He lives, we are told, in churches and temples, and he needs our attention. We are told that he is jealous. He's partial to jealousy. And before he arrived on the scene, there were many different gods. And there still are many different creation stories about how we were formed from breath and clay and snow and leaves, stones and air. But the God of our time is an orderer. He likes to place things in their place. He is the father of food chains, hierarchical systems. And yes, apparently, he has placed us at the top of this hierarchical system. He has given us, apparently, dominion on this thin surface of the spinning blue world that we live on. Once in a while, he sends messengers, prophets, and very occasionally, he sends sons and daughters. So there we are. He's wrapped it up. He's wrapped it up. Oh, I forgot rules. He loves rules. Rules. And he really likes us to obey them. Otherwise, we end up in a very hot place, such as the volcano. So in the space between the Iron Age and 2015 in a space so small in terms of the existence of our universe on this beautiful planet. This is what holds us. This is the reality and the frame into which we have been born, here and now. The space into which we inhabit for the blink of an eye. See it, not as solid, but as something that is constantly shifting. And the space we inhabit is truly an extraordinary space, because in this space we are just beginning to suspect and imagine that there are, in fact, an infinite number of other spaces, going through an infinite number of evolutions and imaginings. What is happening is that very rapidly, it would appear, we are entering a state, a space, where we are becoming aware that we are taking part in the evolution of consciousness. But more importantly, we have always been taking part in the evolution of consciousness. The space has steadily been getting bigger, and we are just beginning to see it now in that way. We are just beginning to see ourselves through that lens. In that space, and in that space, it is a very different space to the one that we have previously inhabited. And we are just beginning to know that we can, in fact, inhabit many different spaces at once. And it's terribly important that if we even go back 200 years ago, the reality that was inhabited then is profoundly different to the human reality we are now inhabiting in our time. If you go back 500 years before then, the earth was the center of the universe, and it was flat, and everything revolved around it. Imagine what believing that does to your perception of who you are and the reality that you exist within. Now, very recently, the vision of reality that we have is so profoundly different from that of our forebears. I have two mothers. The mother that raised me lives near Tunbridge Wells, and imagine the comedy duo of Hinge and Bracket, and she is both of them. And the mother that gave birth to me is a hard drinking, smoking Scottish woman who was the dean of a college in Vancouver, in Canada. And I asked them both whether the discourse in consciousness and the place of humanity within time and space was ever part of the conversation they had when they were in their 50s, 40s, 30s, 60s. And I love them both dearly. I'm not sure that the wonderful woman that raised me understood the question, and the woman that bore me simply said, "No, dear." It is time in our space, in this space, that we begin to perceive evolution in a different manner to the manner in which we've been taught. And yes, the drawing, you can all imagine the drawing of a kind of ferret-like animal growing into a minute monkey-like animal, growing into a larger chimpanzee, growing into a half gorilla, half man, growing into a man, standing on 2 feet, holding a spear. We've all seen it, haven't we? That's the model of evolution that we're all presented with. A bloke, 14 billion years of evolution, and we've ended up with a bloke wearing a rabbit skin over his testicles holding a spear. That's about the sum of it. We need to put that to one side now. We need to put that to one side. We need to look at it and we need to know him. We need to admire him and respect him for the life that he lived, a great deal harder than ours. And we need to recall him should we need to, but we are not like him at all. We are profoundly different. Now imagine a cave wall, a rock wall, where a woman, his wife, his partner, draws a triangle in mud and ochre. It is the first triangle ever born. Her son, on her death, draws 3 other triangles against each side of that triangle, and each subsequent generation adds yet more design, and circles appear, stars appear, squares appear, which become inherent within an emerging yet ever-changing design, until we arrive now with the most ancient and most beautiful mandala that was ever conceived. And it will grow yet still further. This, perhaps, is the image for the evolution of consciousness. Consciousness is knowing itself. In this space, it is possible that we created ourselves. In this space, we are the creators of our own reality. And we are just beginning now to entertain that, to know that, and to respect that. So now into the space comes the mandala. It is unfinished, forever unfinished, therefore it cannot be named. Therefore it is in itself eternity. My favourite parable at the moment, and I was discussing this with Steve a little earlier, and it changes every so often, is the parable of the treasure in the field. I'm a Christian priest. It's a very short parable told by a teacher of consciousness whose name was Jesus. A man is out walking and stumbles across some treasure in a field. Come on, imagine it. A little glint of gold in the grass. You put your hand down, you brush the grass away. You dig a little with your fingers. You find a chest. In it are goblets and diamonds and pearls. Gold doubloons. Coming through the hedge is Johnny Depp. Have you got it in your mind? No. Okay. Anyway, the man sells all he has simply to buy that field. That's it. Man finds treasure, sells what he has, buys the field. That's the parable. And you are now rich. If you are that man, you're rich. What are you going to do? What are you going to do with all that wealth? It took me 55, 56 Earth years to work out, to understand that there is no chest, there are no doubloons, there is no Johnny Depp. It is about seeing the abundant beauty of what was before him and knowing it. And it was that changed his life. All we have to do is to give ourselves into the consciousness of knowing that miracle as it happens and unfolds in front of us every single second. And the pearl of great price is the same teaching. The mustard seed is the same teaching. In the space we are now in, Christianity, Judaism are collapsing. The narrative, as it is told, of Christianity is collapsing. Islam is currently, tragically, burning itself to death. When I became a parish priest 25 years ago, the word celebrant wasn't even spoken. In a very short period of time, huge changes have taken place within the sacred structures of this island. For every 10 weddings, 8 are now taken by celebrants, 2 are taken by priests. And the framework, especially the framework of monotheism, as it is being taught and practiced and preached, cannot now contain the space that it exists in. And so our understanding of the sacred is being denuded all the time. I'm not saying that it's right, but because there has been nothing thus far to replace it. And that does not mean necessarily that it will die, it just means that it cannot carry on being expressed in the manner in which it is currently being expressed. It is dying before our eyes. Practically speaking, there are very few parish priests upholding a vision of the sacred now left in this land. There are very few of us indeed. And most parish priests now cover, if you're in the countryside, between 5 and 10 parishes. They have become civil servants, not suffering servants. What will happen over the next 50 years is that the practical outworking of Christianity will become more and more dependent on volunteers. So the very notion of the presence of people called priests within our day-to-day lives, wandering around Tesco's in a dog collar, that's going to vanish. And so the whole landscape of actually what a priest is and does, how the sacred is expressed and mediated, what on one hand is collapsing, but on the other, there is now an open space there where there has not been for many, many generations. And there is the possibility that a new generation will take the call of poverty and surrender to the consciousness of love more to heart. And if that is the case, the only one thing that can rescue cultural Christianity in this country is that. There is nothing else now that can rescue it. But any acceptance of this will require a complete change of culture. And I do not sense that happening within this space, within Christian space, at the moment. So what will you sing on the Mandala? What will you leave on the Mandala of consciousness? What will you create? What will we create? What are we creating? And from the reality that has always been the reality of human sacredness, that is plural in form, what will we make of this now? So let's just briefly look at the emerging reality that we are creating. Firstly, tribal religions are not faring well at all. Religions contained by cultures administered by hierarchies, when science is entering the space of the universe and showing us that we are its children, are not faring well at all. And this is the most exciting time of all. Secondly, that the knowing of knowing, the sentient knowing of evolution of consciousness and the possibility of accepting that we create reality. The ever-shining light and shade within the space, and this is something the teachers of consciousness have been trying to help us to understand, that we do not wound our brother and sister, and most urgently now the planet, aligning our consciousness to the reality of love. This is an old theme, an ancient theme. But how are we to interpret that at this point in time? And that the sum of religious teaching is surely greater than its parts. Okay, let's just talk for a little while about human identity. Human identity. Who would like to describe themselves, exactly who they are in 20 words?
Nice. I wasn't expecting this.
20 words.
I'm never used. Male.
Male, yeah.
Western.
Western,
Open-minded.
open-minded.
Worried.
Worried,
Husband. Partner.
partner,
Father.
father.
I can't think of
Okay,
them all.
I'll do. How would you describe yourself in 20 words?
Please don't ask me.
Please say. Female,
Female.
white,
No.
no. Mixed race,
Yes.
yeah.
Mixed.
Heterosexual,
Yes.
yeah. Occupation,
Um,
previous occupation,
Teacher, later.
yeah.
Lots of things.
a lot of
A
things.
lot of them.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, can we see where this is going? Okay, if I'm to describe myself in conventional terms, I am a white Caucasian male. I'm heterosexual. I am a priest, and we've all forgotten nationality, and I'm Scots-Irish. And this is the frame into which we describe ourselves, isn't it? We all are known by our gender, our race, and our occupation, and also our religion in some parts of the planet. And once you've got all of those, then you've got exactly, apparently the shorthand for everything you need in knowing another human being. Gender, race, tribe, occupation, religion, sexuality. We do not and have never defined ourselves in relation to the planet. Strange that none of us would be here without it. And yet we have never defined ourselves in relation to the planet. The old religions that have held human purpose and identity and in place do not have the vocabulary inherent within them to do this. At a time when the planet is in grave peril, at a time when the force of human beings is becoming in itself a force of nature, the old framework of religious, of how we value what is sacred, a very fundamental part of our identity, has no framework for how we describe ourselves in relation to the planet. So our most fundamental relationship is not part of the identity with which we know ourselves. And it is that omission that has led us to where we are in relation to the planet, our seemingly inability to live sustainably. How can we live sustainably if we do not define ourselves in relation to the thing that we are meant to be living sustainably with? And this is a state of affairs that needs to change urgently. And we cannot change our relationship with the planet. We cannot live sustainably. We cannot follow a new relationship with the planet based on the old definitions which are rooted in the very system that is destroying it. It just doesn't make sense. Once we can see ourselves truly in relation to the planet, then we can set about knowing ourselves, firstly for real, and secondly, real enough to be able to change our patterns of behavior. Okay, so let's define ourselves in a different way. We believed in polytheism. There were many gods inhabiting rivers, streams, mountains, so we were animists. There are still groups of human beings living animist lifestyles today. So they would be described, if we were describing their relationship to the planet, it would be animist. 10,000 years ago in Iran or Iraq, somewhere in the Fertile Crescent, someone planted a seed, and from there, up until today, we became agrarians. So we are agrarians. That's our relationship to the planet. That might be manifest through supermarkets, it might be manifest through the food that we grow ourselves, but we are not hunter-gatherers anymore, we are agrarians. And then something extraordinary happened in the 1820s and 1830s. The Romantic movement began. The Romantic movement, in part, was a reaction to the industrialization that those involved in its conception were seeing. And so at that point, a new definition arrived, and I would like to add romantic to that definition, spurred by Yeats and Keats and Byron and the Romantic artists. We had from there a completely different view of ourselves in relation to the land. And it was the Romantic movement that gave birth to the environmental movement, that gave birth to our understanding and notions of sustainability. After the Second World War, as has been pointed out, we developed technology. And that technology helped the agrarians to become utterly dominant in terms of our relationship with the natural world. No longer did we need muscle and sweat. We had machines. We can just wipe out an entire woodland in a day. We can drain a lake in 24 hours. We are now so powerful in relationship to the planet. So most of us now living in this room will be benefiting and living a techno-agrarian lifestyle. And that's what we are. We are techno-agrarians. Some of us in this room might be romantic agrarians. Therefore, we are living an agrarian lifestyle, but we are honoring the earth in the process through the romantic ideals set up, conceptualized at the birth of the Romantic movement. Until we know ourselves and see ourselves and are able to place ourselves within that panoply of definition, nothing can change, because there is nothing to change, because it has not been defined in any way before. So having heard those descriptions, who would describe themselves as an animist? No. A romantic animist. There are some. An agrarian. How many agrarians? How many techno-agrarians? How many romantic agrarians? You might be able to. But once we can know it, once we can name it, then we can change it. We can't change it until we've named it and known it. We cannot have sustainability until we realize that the techno-agrarian lifestyle is what is crippling our current view of ourselves. It's not just the farmers or the lumberjacks or the forestry industry or the banking industry, which is highly reliant on techno-agrarian Techno Agrarian lifestyle. We cannot change it until we know. And so to conclude, I have no advice other than not to be afraid to dream, and to know who we are and where we are for this relatively short period of time. Know that history teaches us that doctrine and theology are occasional single lines on the mandala and no more. And the Animists left their lines on the mandala, the Agrarians left their lines. The Romantic Agrarians are leaving their lines now, and the Techno Agrarians are painting most of it now. And in the knowledge of impermanence, and the ever-moving tides of turning matter into form which can only ever dissolve as one space of time folds and creates another, right now all human beings need a temple of hope, where white can meet black and know them as the same, where Muslim and Christian can embrace, where human beings can truly embrace the natural world in which we find ourselves. Truly do that from a perspective of understanding where we are standing with it. Where the feather and the fin and the petal and the stone are known as miraculous in themselves, in this space between in which we know them.
Thank you very much. It's now 20 past 6. We're going to have some questions about half an hour. That takes us about 7. We are continuing with England Wales, and we are on the Welsh-English border. I'd like to start by just sort of responding to this, and then I'll open it up to your good self. I think the one of the big things that I think I took from that, and from the conversation I had with Peter this morning, is that how it's very easy to respond to sustainability in a modern problem or a modern question, and it's not. It's got its roots way back into our culture. It's so far back that actually it's very difficult to sift out where it begins and where it ends. And we're looking at a future where the possibilities are remarkable. The things people are talking about are just mind-boggling. And we're at this juxtaposition between the two, where we're trying to find a balance between the old and the new, and sustainability is part of that discussion. Because if we can't sort of pull ourselves out of the kind of drag of the past and into this new kind of world, then we're going to face really difficult problems, and we are facing difficult problems. And some of these problems are so big they're difficult to get your head around, totally. And in a way, drawing upon the past and understanding how to renew that and take that forward in a more sustainable way, I think is a really important, and we're really asking some difficult questions about what we're about. And I think the other thing I wanted to take about was it's very easy in the West, and especially within the narrow confines of where we live, not to think globally, because some spirituality and religion are important to other people in different parts of the world. This debate in our secular society may sound out of place, but it's a debate which has to be taken into account, because around the planet, ritual and belief are an integral part of how people view the world and see the world. And this is a global thing. We're a global family. We're all in this together. It's not like it affects one place. We're all involved in this together. We have to accommodate other people's worldviews and ideas within that. And some of these people's worldview ideas are deeply rooted in belief. And to ignore that is to miss out a very significant part of that dialogue or language we were talking about earlier on. And I thank Peter for bringing that up. If I can open this up to general discussion for 20 minutes, or any questions, or maybe follow on some questions that Herbie you had, or Grace you had.
Isn't that a huge dilemma though, that in speaking as you've done, both and listening to you too, Steve, I have heard you speak on a few occasions. What worries me is that as we're moving on, I don't want to get tedious about what's happening currently because it's a huge issue, the disturbance of the Middle East and the problems that we're having in acknowledging help which is necessary for others. Is it the problem I'm having personally with sifting through, as I've got taken that from what you've said, is that without any identity of my own, with a badge of some sort, it becomes a bit of an issue largely that there's a bit of a dearth here in our society where we are predominantly secular, and that people have almost lost the pride in being Christian. Am I right in saying that? That I think typically, I don't know too many people who visit the church each Sunday any longer, despite in my younger years that was pretty much a framework of our society, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Whether it be from a Protestant, Catholic background, whatever, the majority of people did take their children off to church, didn't they, in my earlier years, you know, and give us some sort of, how can I put it, practice of thought, if you like. But that seems to have gone now, largely in amongst my counterparts, you know. People are lost.
It hasn't gone,
And
it's just, it's not needed.
Okay.
You know, society doesn't seem to feel that it needs it anymore.
So what are you actually advocating? That we should take hold of some sort of notion of a marked identity yet again in amongst this? Because what is surely the problem in modern life is that we are up against some huge fierceness of ideology in relation to Islam and Judaism and the problems that we're experiencing now. Do you see what I'm saying? To be kind of wishy-washy is maybe...
I'm not being wishy-washy, I'm just saying that unless we understand where we are, and part of the collapse of the Christian narrative is part of where we are. So that has created a huge space which secularism has filled, and then we can have a conversation about sustainability. We can all understand how essential that it is, that we do not take...
But what are you sustaining, Peter? That's what I'm trying to get at. Are we sustaining our Christian roots here in the British Isles? Do you see where my thought pattern's going?
How does Jesus fit into all this?
Yeah.
I'll just answer the first one.
Okay.
There is nothing to sustain unless we sort our relationship with the planet out. Okay, so what I'm saying is that if the monotheistic faiths which have largely, up until what Pope Francis said 3 months ago, have been actually resolutely silent about our relationship with the natural world. And yes, what's happening in the Middle East, that's another conversation.
I didn't want to get into that, but it's something which is current and is a...
But if the monotheistic faiths cannot simply hold the reality of the destruction that is unfolding before us, then either they change and evolve, or it is up to us now to start to dream afresh, dream anew, without that old framework. I'm a Christian priest. It doesn't cause me any pleasure to say this, but at the moment I'm much more concerned about our relationship with the planet, because it's that's broken. And until we can acknowledge that, rather than paper over it with genetic engineering projects, we'll genetically modify this so it'll grow here and we'll all be okay, when we're never addressing the problem of our fundamental relationship with the planet, and the fact that techno agrarian behaviour
So you don't believe in a saviour in relation. Sorry, you're saying you're a Christian priest, but is it not at the root of Christianity that, or any religion, that there is ultimately an all-powerful being who will save us despite all this mess we're in? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I, in the terms of evolution of consciousness, I think that it's time we grew up.
Okay.
I did not ask Mummy and Daddy to come riding over the hills.
It's about personal responsibility,
Yeah,
isn't it?
absolutely.
And everybody taking
Yeah.
personal
Okay.
responsibility.
Right.
Rather than the church standing up telling you how to behave, this is a huge, we're now in a vacuum whereby, either we've got to take responsibility for that. We can choose our teachers now. We live in a global society. I can choose to listen to the Jain tradition, to the teachings of Bali. I can choose to listen to the Buddha. I can choose to listen to the Dalai Lama. I can choose to listen to Jesus Christ. I can choose to listen to Muhammad. But the time has come now where we, as a human race, are being invited to really take responsibility. And it's that we keep fudging. And whilst we can talk about sustainability, because it is essentially beautiful, but we cannot bring it about until we actually face truly where we are.
Go ahead. Sorry, Herbie, do you want to ask a question?
I'll come back to this question of who we are is certainly one of the issues that I've been very concerned about. And the question is to what extent that is defined by consciousness or by technology. I think it's a very important difference because technology is where we are now rooted in terms of our daily activities. You are here in a motor car, we are all here in a motor car. So that means we have just burned a lot of carbon to be able to get here. But that's not just the only bit of carbon that we burn. We have our washing machines, our fridges, our cars, the airplanes, whatever. So that obviously is at the root of what you're saying. And it's not just, I would say, agrarian, techno agrarian. It's much more than that. It's selfie too. It's all that new stuff. Selfie. The kind of
Vanity.
yeah.
Status power.
We are being forced to think beyond techno agrarian. We are being forced to basically be consumers of to a degree that has never before existed. In terms of the fact that whenever in a child's mind today a spark comes of inspiration, is very quickly suppressed by being forced to put the earplugs in and to project yourself individually as part of a sort of collectivity of consumers. So what I'm really trying to get at is the consciousness of living today on this planet is very little to do with these impacts any longer. We simply take it for granted that we live this way of life, which enormous impacts globally, which we do not take for granted or we are not aware of. And so these are huge, huge issues. Also, another point that I worked on a lot is that we live in an urbanizing society, and the urban mindset is a completely different mindset from, the hunter-gatherer or the small-scale farmer lifestyle. In the city, you take for granted that the food is there, that the energy is there, that all the supplies are there. So, of course, I'm simply, in some ways, adding or summarizing to some of the points that you've already raised. So these are the huge issues that we haven't grappled with.
Yes, we haven't grappled with them, and I'm saying it's time we did.
Rob. Hi. I wonder if you'd comment on the thought that I've often had with respect to particularly Christianity, but the other monotheistic religions, that in some small measure or in some larger measure, are they not responsible for our attitude towards the world as a resource to be exploited? I think in terms of such phrases as "go forth and multiply" and "the beast of the field and the fish of the fowl of the air" and such like, and that then becomes an extension into what we have here, post-romantic period of economic hedonism and a utilitarian attitude towards the planet as a giant B&Q, so that we're actually externalized in that respect. And I can't, in all honesty, say that Christianity or any of the other major religions that you've been discussing should be considered to be innocent of pushing people's outlook and spiritual understanding of the world in that direction. I mean, if we're looking at something that these religions could do, then an emphasis on integration into other organisms on the planet, rather than considering ourselves as the apex of it,
I agree.
is. So I'm just wondering if you would comment on this thought that I've presented to you of the responsibility of these religions in moulding that feeling.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, just the simple notion of calling our wild cousins beasts of the field, and all the connotations that come with that. Do we want to hang on to that? Is that how we want to view the natural world? Do we want to continue to insist that we are at the top of a hierarchical system? Do we want to continue to behave, more importantly, as if we have been given dominion without any sense of responsibility to do exactly as we please?
That's my point. Exactly.
Yeah.
And these soulless organisms.
Absolutely.
I mean, this element of soul, which I'm sure could fill weeks to discuss, but I mean, the thing is that it seems as if soul is a reality, then we've lost it. And I would say that I would transplant instead of soul. I would be saying social and personal responsibility. I think is probably what we need to look.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, but I mean, I think, whatever way you look at it, we seem to be approaching a huge great war in terms of the manner in which we have previously defined ourselves, the tools we have used to do that with, and the cultural jigsaw that we have happened to have found ourselves with. None of this can sustain us into the future. And I think that's what I'm saying. And I don't think we can look at the idea of sustainability within that backdrop. We need to dream and imagine far bigger than we have previously dared. And we can only do that by actually truly facing up to what we have created, how we have created it, and where we are now. I mean, we are facing the oncoming tsunami of the sixth mass extinction event in the history of this planet, largely down to human behavior. Can anyone honestly say, any of us put our hands up in this room and say, I have had nothing to do with this? I certainly can't. But faced with that reality, are we to simply continue as we are, bolting on ecological and sustainable ideas, or is it going to require a complete rethink?
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. I think also the fact that is it wish fulfillment when we consider revelation? I mean, like, in that way we're building our own Armageddon, if you know.
Absolutely. I mean, we can either choose that, or I think it will be forced upon us.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you for your talk. And I just wanted to check with you. If someone said, "What was he on about?" You went to that talk, you saw that blog talk. What was he talking about? And my summary would be that my work is I spend my day job looking at sustainable development in the future and what might happen. And my only comfort is I think, oh God, well at least technology will save us, right? So my reaction to your talk was, even if technology saves us, what Peter's saying is it still won't do anything for my existential angst. I'll still be there on a Tuesday night at 11:15 wondering why the hell I exist. Is that a fair summary of what you were saying to us? that we have to find something in order to deal with
I think we've just got to be a lot braver and a lot bolder. Compared to the man standing up with the spear. We are so comfortable. We have time to think. We have time to imagine. We have time to consider. We can sit in a warm house. We can have a bath. We've got 3 square meals. Thanks to the Techno Agrarian revolution. And what is the bequest of all of this? And in a sense, are we just drift along thinking, oh, the government will sort it out, or they'll sort it out? No, I am saying that this is something that is going to have to involve each one of us to understand that we are sleepwalking towards a precipice, and to collegiately get together and say, well, actually we need to think completely differently about what a human being is, does, the way it functions, and how we exist. I'm quite excited about that. I'm not sure David Cameron would share that view, but I'm quite excited. Yes.
In order to do this, to wake up from this sleepwalk and take personal responsibility, do you not think we need to, we can only really, or if that's only possible when religion is gone? Because people, you know, to me, religion seems to be an easy way to cop out. It's not my responsibility, it's somebody else's responsibility. I'm just doing what I'm told. And all the time that you're waiting to be told what to do by somebody else, you're not taking personal responsibility. So, I mean, for me, the evolution revolves around the death of religion. And it's only with the death of religion that we can have the birth of personal responsibility.
Yeah, I think you're talking about the death of that religion, and I couldn't agree with you more. Whether human beings will completely eradicate notions of the sacred, notions of experienced divine love.
Or organised religion, and I suppose in that respect as it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I couldn't agree with you more. But I don't think we're seeing the death of religion. I don't think we're ultimately seeing the death of society. I think we're being asked to just be far braver and bolder than in our imagining of who we are in terms of the evolution of consciousness.
Well, that would be much easier if there are no gods, you know, around there to.
I think that's dependent on the God. It depends, you know. Often people say, you know, I don't believe in this, that, and this type of God, and I say, well, no, neither do I. But I think those of us who are somehow moved or feel ourselves called down the religious avenue, I don't think suddenly that will be evolved out of us. I think what is perhaps needed is a new definition of actually what that means. And I couldn't agree more that religions need to actually stand up and go, okay, we have a very big part to play in the map that we now inhabit, and we need to take responsibility for that and think quite differently about our place within it. And that thinking is urgent.
When some people sort of object to atheism, and you know, when I say I'm an atheist, they say, oh my God, what do you believe in? Well, I believe in love and compassion and empathy. You know, and those ideals are all great, but I don't need somebody else to tell me to be nice to someone.
Sure.
Figure that out for myself.
Sure.
That's the right thing to do.
Sure. I'm reading a very interesting book at the moment by a wonderful person who was a Scottish bishop, and he said that everyone assumes that faith revolves around certainty. He said faith has nothing to do with certainty. Faith is about actually taking a chance on everything that's uncertain. And I rather like that description. That to me is, I find quite hopeful. But yes, I mean, in part, I'm not going to make judgments about how you have ended up where you are, but I completely understand that looking at the religious discourse within our culture today, most people are going to just run in the opposite direction.
One way of looking at some of these problems, from my perspective, and I've held this for quite a few years, is that there appears to be something of a chasm developed between several sides of our existence, of our being. If we look at things like our basic anatomy, if we look at our basic physiology, if we look at our genetics, these have to be, in all honesty, and I don't think many scientists would disagree, the product of many generations, many millennia, many, maybe millions of years of evolution, of acquiring those characteristics. And despite the best endeavours of, should we call it, chemotechnology, masquerading as private or public health services, we seem to be going down rather fast, judging by the state of affairs that many of us in old age, the institutions that try to keep us going and functioning till we're 90 or 100 or whatever. That is something I think, you know, needs to be taken as read. But there is another side of us that, perhaps enhanced by modern technology, and that is something, for want of a better word, is brain power. We seem to have been able to develop and speed up the various processes that allow us and are perhaps cyclically going along with technological innovation. What keeps us going are structures and physiology and genetics are still going very, very gently. And if they're not, we have problems. Whereas our brain power seems to be able to go very, very fast, but doesn't seem to be able to recognise that, you know, we have to respect that these, our anatomy, genetics, physiology, really need, you know, we nearly need to run our lives at the rate at which we're designed to, not the rate which our brains seem to think we can get on with. And that, to me, seems to be something of the problem that we've landed ourselves with.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, that poses huge questions. Again, you know, dare I say, you know, I was watching a film the other day, and the fishermen involved were dynamiting the sea to kill the fish. That's not possible without technology. So at some point, we have to be able to discern what is good technology and what isn't. And technology is such a relatively new invention that we haven't really kind of even begun to think about that yet. But thank you. Yes, in terms of speed of existence, how many of us here would like to slow down to be able to stand and stare as the poet stand? But again, these are the choices that we all make.
Some of us are happy to. May I raise one other one briefly? From your knowledge of theological training at the moment, are there any religions, or perhaps more particularly in this country still, does the Christian religion, the training, the theological training, does it actually have any sense of the sacred still? Is that imparted or encouraged in the training?
No, I think with the formalisation of the training of priests, which happened in the 1880s, it's become intensely intellectualised, and running alongside that, it has also lost just about every single intellectual argument with the secularists that has been. So I see the point in that system continuing. That makes any sense.
Does a vicar, whenever he's qualified, does he have a sense of the sacred? Do you think?
I can't. I would hope so. I would claim to have, but I can't speak.
You trained a few years ago.
Yeah,
I think.
I can't speak for the other side. I wish that would be down to them to answer.
Thanks.
I think one of the things for me is that it's very easy with sustainability to get into intellectual arguments, and you're always dealing with opposites. There's always an opposite for everything. This guy's got a report that says this, this guy's got a report that says that, he's got a counter report, and you get dizzy with it. And I think one of the key things is really about how we feel.
Absolutely.
Do we care? We get lost in these arguments, and actually, you know, when it comes down to it, it comes down to a feeling. It's an experiential thing. Do we love this earth enough to actually do something, rather than just argue all the time? And then arguments become violence, and then meanwhile the planet goes on. And how do we stop arguing and just start caring?
I don't think it's about loving the other enough. I think it's about loving ourselves enough. If we were to see ourselves truly in the light of how extraordinary we are, we wouldn't be behaving in the damaging fashion.
Indeed, but if we wait for a report to tell us that, it'll be too late.
It will.
Yeah, we've got to feel, we've got to actually start feeling about wanting to do something. And the people in this room obviously feel that, they obviously care. That's why they're here. It's about taking that message out. But I think if we try to, and I think that's one of the things that the new faith, new faith can bring, is that sense of care and feeling. Not intellectual argument, but say this is something that matters. This is something we care about. If we care about it, we'll do something. Yeah. And I'm picking up on a couple of things in terms of faith and all the rest of it. it's incredible how when push comes to shove, when we're up against the hard place, we suddenly find God, or we suddenly start believing in whatever we're believing in, because there's nothing else. There's nothing else there. But it's incredible how we respond to that, and I think while we've got lots of clever arguments, we will spend forever going around in circles. We've got to push through those clever arguments and say we care.
It's about
we're
what
going to
type
do something.
Yeah, I mean, what type of species do we want to be at the moment? Where we're developing into quite an unpleasant species.
Not a dead one.
Yeah. So what type of species do we want to be? If an alien life form, which I'm sure the universe is teeming with other life forms, if they were to arrive on this planet, how would they know us? How would they judge us? Would they be appalled? They would probably be appalled with our behaviour. So I mean, what type of species do we want to be? I'm not sure we've ever really asked that question.
And I think another challenge is the immediacy. These questions seem to be so we can put it up to tomorrow. So long as I can press the light and the light comes on and it's a cheap rate, I don't care where it comes from. But when it all starts, it's slowly but surely breaking down, and it's very difficult to take that on board because everything seems to be working. But I was watching something on TV. There is apostles in, I think it's somewhere in South America, who are painting the side of the hill white because the ice has melted, and they think if they paint it white, it will reflect the light and the ice will come back. There are people in the Caribbean who are building, because the government's not doing anything, building walls with whatever they can find to hold back the sea. This is immediate, but it's not immediate to us. So in the West, we don't have that kind of immediacy, or it doesn't feel like it's immediacy. And I think that's one of the tricky things. We have to think bigger than just our own immediacy.
Well, I mean, this goes back to our conversation this afternoon. Are we to define ourselves as by nationality, or are we to find, are we to say, well, actually, I'm a human being, I live on planet Earth, and that becomes the most apparent, the most important definition that we can actually say of ourselves, or are we to continue to define ourselves along tribal boundaries, which essentially, I think, coming to the end of their days.
Can I finish on quite a hopeful
Yes.
example of something that's happening there? And I don't know if you're aware of him, the 20-year-old Dutch boy, he's a boy actor, I can't remember his surname, who is currently, he's nearly at the final stage, isn't he, for clearing up the...
Boy and Slut.
Yes.
Famous, I'm afraid that's not working. He's trying to collect up plastics from the oceans that we've already thrown into. It's not working. Can't forget about that, I'm afraid.
So finishing on
one of the things that was incredibly hopeful about that was a 17-year-old boy goes on holiday, he's scuba diving, he sees more plastic than fish, and he devotes the next 4 years of his life, unfortunately, to bad effects, to fix the problem. And he raised the money through technology, through the internet. If the internet hadn't been around, he would never have made the money to make his prototypes, to get research scientists and things like this. So what we've got, even if we don't have the solution that he was hoping for, what we've got is an original mind that sees a problem and thinks, well, I'm not going to say this is somebody else's problem. I'm going to see what I can do. And whether it works or whether it doesn't, what he actually achieved in that 4 years is astonishing.
Well, we've just had a whole lot of meetings about this topic in Bristol over the last few months. And basically, unless we start by getting rid of the use of plastics and the way we currently use it, the whole way we package food in plastic trays, all the rest of it, the plastic bags, the plastic bottles and so on. By the time it's been released into the environment, you can no longer capture it.
Yeah.
Even if you try your best and you can, bits and pieces you can of course capture with this technology, but the bulk of it is being released into in the environment anyway, regardless as to what this guy is trying to do, unfortunately.
But it's minds like that, and these
Yeah.
minds are evolving, they are coming up, they are saying, do you know what? Everyone's saying that this is a problem for our children. Well, here I am. I'm going to have a go.
Yeah.
And if nothing else, he stood up and he's had a go.
Yeah,
And if
yeah.
we can get more of our children to think
Yeah.
in that way, then maybe there is some hope for the future.
I think, and just to follow up on that, I think the thing is that, yeah, it's very easy to shrug your shoulders and just go, it's too easy to do that. But the great thing is there are champions, Herbie, Peter, and everybody in this room. We're all champions, and we can change that. It's become the change you want to see. It's about, you can make a difference. Small changes can resonate and make significant differences. Conversations, and they are changing. I mean, I'm having conversations now where 10 years ago I wasn't having this conversation whatsoever. Things are changing, and consciousness. We are becoming more conscious globally. Faith is an important part of that. We're going to need a lot of it because we're going to get through a lot of problems ahead of us, and we're going to have to believe that what we're doing is the right thing. Because if we sit around waiting for reports, we'll be here forever and a day. We have to believe that this is the right thing to do, and that is a question of faith. It's not a question of reasoning it.
But it's ultimately a question of power. I mean, unless we can influence what the guys in the City of London sit down to decide every day in terms of a new plastics factory, logging, 100,000 square miles in the Amazon, creating huge soybean fields in Mato Grosso or whatever it happens to be. Unless we can change the power structures, the decision-making process, the financial systems that ultimately leave us in this mess, because that's where it all starts. The people making decisions on fracking. Cameron has decided we're going to frack. Cameron has decided, Osborne has decided we're going to build Hinkley Point. That's where the problem lies above all else. And unless we get to grips with that, however much we try to change our consciousness at the individual level, it's not going to have any impact. No, it's not. Sorry.
No, I think
Everything comes from within you, not from outside.
But those guys make decisions on our behalf. So
That
they
doesn't
claim.
that doesn't matter. If you live as who you are within yourself, then it will make a difference.
It make a little bit of difference.
It can make a difference politically as well, though. If the society wants the direction to be environmental, green, sustainable,
Yeah.
then eventually that will get reflected in politics.
Eventually, yeah.
So it might be slow, but
Yeah.
I think what we're seeing in the Labour Party, believe it or whether you agree or not, is a reflection, a mirror of something is wrong.
Yeah, sure.
We know something's wrong, but we don't know what that is, and we don't know how to fix that. But we know something's not right, and that's mirroring back at us in that. People are saying something has to change, but we don't know what it is, and that is part of this debate. Nobody's saying we've got the answers, but what we're saying is we're starting a journey.
I would just like to say, throughout my life, I've been kind of browbeaten by these terrible decisions that I've seen being made in relationship to the planet, in terms of our relationship to the planet, our dream of sustainability. But if we give up hope, then really everything is lost. And I would just invite everyone to be bold enough and brave enough and loving enough to really hope for a better future. Without that, there won't be one.
That's true. And I'll let you finish off, but I thought it was a fabulous point. We'll do it in post-ed. But please, yes.
I was just going to say that it's also a question of timing, I think, and something we didn't mention was education, and that starts at primary schools. And 25 years ago, we helped a group of people create an urban wildlife group in Scotland. It was the first one, and we tried to persuade teachers in Scottish playgrounds to dig up their playgrounds and put in wildlife areas. And it's taken a long time, but 25 years later, if you went to the village school, the next village in Landobo, there's an organic garden. They're growing food things, and the orchards that we tried to promote in our work as landscape architects, they're happening. They happen in schools, so schools are producing their own food. So I think that one of the key things are starting with young people, education, environmental studies, inspirational stories about people like John Muir, a recognition of the importance of wilderness, not losing wilderness in all the rest of the things that you're doing. It's very exciting. We're in an exciting political period because I think it's great that young people who are this group who've been excluded and felt that they've been denied being part of politics are coming forward, and they're coming forward with environmental ideas and social entrepreneurial ideas, and they should be encouraged and helped, and we as an older generation should support and encourage them to be part of it.
Absolutely.
Because it's through political change and not short-term solutions, but actually politicians being brave enough to take long-term decisions, environmental decisions, rather than this sort of short cycle of everything, which is going to make the real difference. And so we don't give up heart. I mean, we work in landscape architecture, and we've tried in our working life to change in a small way people's views. And it's heartening to see those things though are changing.
Yeah.
And here in this room, in the nearest little town, there are charities like Bees for Development are using beekeeping on the other side of the world for people to develop small micro business, and campaigning for a bee-friendly momisher for people to change in our work.
Absolutely.
The way people cut verges and align more wildlife. So the
Absolutely.
things are happening, and now people have bees on the top of city centres, and it's all small. It's small stuff, but it needs to be championed and
I agree.
supported whenever we can.
I agree, but I want to hear this from our politicians. I don't want to have to put my politician under pressure to not, give fracking the go-ahead. I don't want to have to badger him to vote against that. I want our politicians to now stand up and actually acknowledge the problems we're facing and actually own up to them and do something about it, rather than small groups of all of us having to constantly bang on the door saying, will you behave respectfully and responsibly? In that sense, and now I am getting cross, because I do not feel that we're being represented, I do not feel that we're being offered a future, and I do not feel that in any way the current nature of our political discourse is in any way responsible in relation to the future of our children and the environment. And I want to hear politicians start to talk this language, and at the moment I do not, but I'm not going to give up hope that very soon they may well begin to do so.
Nicola Sturgeon is beginning to talk the right language.
But
But
I
our
honour
local MP
all the small things that have been done in the name of the planet, and for the love of harmony, for the love of symmetry. I just want to hear this conversation, from our politicians.
We'll take one last question and then we'll wrap that up. That's okay.
Well, it's a comment really, but our local MP supports fracking, and our local MP is voted by hopefully also everybody in this room, but that is a fact, and we have to be aware of that, and we have to, because our local MPs are voted to their position. David Davis, he's been on my front door and I've talked to him about it, and he doesn't like listening to people. He doesn't listen. He closes his ears and he walks away without giving a reasonable response. And he's meant to be our representative in Parliament, and he doesn't represent most people because of our vote. No, I didn't. I know, by the system. The system. Yeah, but the system, the voting system, doesn't work for us. We need to do our little bit in order to change things, and it is easy, very easy, to feel like the establishment, the banks are in control, which they are. But in order to change that, we can't wait for them to change from the up down.
No.
It's not going to happen.
Well,
we have to make decisions ourselves about changing things, like supermarkets who say, well, we only produce and sell what people want to buy, but none of us here presumably wants to buy things wrapped up with loads and loads of plastic.
No, but therefore now is the time, if we're going to have hope in the future, each one of us individually needs to take responsibility. So I need to go and talk to my friends who I know voted Conservative and just say, please, can you hear me for 10 minutes? Because I need to tell you what my heart is saying about this.
Yes.
But as this gentleman rightly pointed out, when Adolf Hitler, or when they were doing the German war trials, one of their defences was that I'm not taking responsibility for this, the German people voted me in. And in a sense, we're almost, I'm not going to draw similarities between the two, but we voted in the decision makers that we have. Hopefully this will be the last time that we vote in this particular brand of decision making. I sincerely hope so.
I think I'm going to bring it to a close. It is 7 o'clock. I know Peter's got a long drive now. I'd like to say thank you for coming along and
We were just getting going then.
I know. I mean, I'm happy for this to continue. And there's a lot more to be said. I'm sure we could be here till next Saturday still talking. But the thing is, I think the message is, get involved, get informed, get involved, make a difference.
And stay hopeful.
And keep the faith.
Dare to hope. Dare to hope.
Thank you very much.